1281 AD. The waters off the coast of Japan. Kublai Khan, grandson of Genghis Khan, ruler of the largest contiguous empire in human history, has assembled 4,400 vessels and 140,000 soldiers for the greatest naval invasion the medieval world has ever seen. Japan's samurai defenders watch from the shore, outnumbered, outgunned, and running out of time. Nobody on Earth can stop what's coming. But let's change one thing. Moving through those same waters, making almost no sound despite being 610 feet of pure technological terror, is the USS Zumwalt, a 15,000-ton stealth destroyer from 2016 with the radar signature of a fishing boat. Weapons that can strike from the next horizon in a whole design so alien that medieval shipwrights wouldn't know where to begin. So what if the most advanced destroyer ever built faces the largest naval invasion in medieval history? Let's see what just dropped in 13th century Japanese waters. The USS Zumwalt is not a warship in any sense Kublai Khan's admirals would recognize, and that's before it fires a single round. Its angular tumble-home hull, sloping inward from the waterline, is designed specifically to deflect radar waves rather than bounce them back. Despite being 610 feet long and displacing 15,000 tons, it returns a radar signature comparable to a small fishing vessel in 1281, where detection means eyeballs and signal fires. The Zumwalt is effectively invisible until it decides otherwise. It runs on 78 megawatts of electric power, enough to light a small city generated by gas turbines driving an integrated electric propulsion system. It moves at 30-plus knots in near silence, which to a Mongol sailor pulling at his oars would seem less like a ship moving and more like a shadow deciding to become your problem. What it carries makes the stealth almost beside the .80 vertical launch system cells, loaded with a weapons menu that covers every possible tactical situation. Tomahawk cruise missiles with a 1,000-mile range that navigate independently to their targets. SM-6 surface-to-air missiles that can engage threats at 150-plus miles. And ESSM point defense missiles for anything foolish enough to get close to 155mm. Advanced gun systems sit on the deck, originally designed to fire GPS-guided rounds 80 miles with pinpoint accuracy, and layered over all of it, an AN/Spy 3-radar array that can simultaneously track hundreds of targets, while the ship moved silently through pre-dawn fog in 1281. The Zumwalt isn't just the most dangerous ship on the water, it's the most dangerous thing that has ever floated on any water anywhere in human history. But Kublai Khan didn't build the largest empire in history by sending weak opponents. The 1281 invasion fleet is the most sophisticated, largest coordinated naval operation the medieval world has ever attempted, the product of years of preparation, thousands of shipbuilders, and the full industrial capacity of both Korea and conquered China. These aren't fishing boats pressed into military service. These are purpose-built warships and troop transports commanded by officers who have conquered kingdoms from the steppes of Eastern Europe to the shores of the Pacific. The Mongol commanders have something else the Zumwalt's crew needs to respect: adaptability. When their first invasion of Japan in 1274 failed, Kublai Khan didn't accept defeat. He spent 7 years building a bigger, better fleet and came back. The military doctrine that carried Mongol armies across half the known world is built on rapid adaptation, overwhelming force, and absolutely no concept of a situation being unwinnable. These are dangerous people, even to a ship from years in their future. 140,000 soldiers, 4,400 ships, the full weight of the most powerful empire on Earth, and no framework whatsoever for what's about to happen to them. The battle. It starts before a single Mongol lookout has finished rubbing sleep from his eyes. The Zumwalt runs dark at 3 a.m. No lights, radar in passive mode, hull barely breaking the surface chop. Its Spy 3 array paints a complete picture of the Mongol fleet across 30 miles of ocean without emitting a detectable signal. Every command ship, every troop transport, every supply vessel appears on the combat display as a labeled target package. The crew begins prioritizing command vessels first, supply ships second, troop transports third. There's one problem nobody planned for. GPS doesn't exist in 1281. The satellites that Tomahawk missiles normally rely on for precision navigation haven't been launched yet. They won't exist for another 700 years. The crew switches to inertial navigation. The missile tracks its own movement through space using gyroscopes and accelerometers, calculating position from the moment of launch. It's older technology. It's less precise over short distances against targets the size of medieval warships. It's more than enough. The first Tomahawk launches. It clears the deck at a whisper. The launch signature of a VLS cell is a fraction of a traditional gun firing. The missile drops to 50 feet above the water and accelerates to 550 miles per hour, threading through pre-dawn darkness on nothing but its own internal mathematics. No satellites, no ground stations, no external signal of any kind, just gyroscopes spinning in the dark, counting every degree of movement since launch, doing calculations that wouldn't be invented for another 6 centuries. There is no sound of approach at that altitude and speed. There is no warning. The 1,000-pound warhead detonates against the command ship's hull, and the resulting fireball lights up 3 miles of ocean on the Mongol fleet. This produces something the most battle-hardened commanders have never experienced, an attack with no visible source. Watchers on deck saw no approaching vessel, no catapult arc, nothing. A ship simply ceased to exist. Officers who have held formations against cavalry charges numbering in the thousands are now looking at each other with no tactical response available, because no tactical doctrine of 1281 has a chapter on this. The Zumwalt launches a second Tomahawk, then a third. Each one threads through the darkness on inertial guidance alone and arrives exactly where it is least welcome. The Eastern Route Fleet's flagship takes a direct hit. Amidship's 140,000 pounds of warship folding inward in a fraction of a second. Supply ships carrying the fleet's provisions and repair materials become catastrophic. Chain reaction fireballs, secondary explosions tearing through adjacent vessels as stored fuel and equipment cook off in sequence. Command ships carrying Kublai Khan's senior naval officers simply stop existing. The fleet's leadership structure begins collapsing within the first 20 minutes. Signal fires break out across the fleet, the medieval equivalent of emergency communications. Commanders on surviving ships try to organize a response, try to determine direction of attack, try to do anything other than sit and receive, but every signal fire just makes them a better target. The Spy 3 radar, which needs no satellites, which runs entirely on the Zumwalt's own 78 megawatts of generated power, marks every new light source and adds it to the targeting queue. A group of Korean warships, faster than the Chinese transports crewed by experienced sailors, breaks from the main fleet and attempts to flank the direction they think the attack is coming from. It's the correct instinct. It's the wrong century. The Zumwalt pivots at 30 knots, repositions in darkness, and the flanking maneuver arrives at empty water. When the ESSM point defense systems acquire the Korean ships at close range, the engagement lasts less than 90 seconds. As dawn breaks and a pale gray light begins separating ocean from sky, the full scale of what has happened to the Mongol fleet becomes visible for the first time. Hundreds of ships are already gone. Hundreds more are disabled, listing on fire their crews in the water. The orderly invasion formation that took months of coordination to assemble. 2 fleets, 900 ships from Korea, 3,500 from southern China, converging on Hakata Bay in a pincer that was supposed to overwhelm Japanese defenses, has become a scattered, burning chaos across 20 miles of ocean. The Zumwalt closes to gun range. The 155mm advanced gun systems open up on the densest ship clusters without GPS. The rounds aren't precision-guided, but at this distance against targets this size, they don't need to be. A medieval warship is not a hardened target. It is wood, rope, sail, and human beings. And a 155mm shell arriving at 2,800 feet per second does not require precision to be catastrophic. Air-burst rounds detonate above crowded decks. Rigging shreds. Hulls splinter below the waterline. Ships that have sailed from Korea and southern China, crewed by men who crossed open ocean to conquer an island empire, are going down in water they never expected to die in. The instinct of sailors, under threat crowd together, form defensive clusters, present a unified front, works catastrophically against them. Here, the Zumwalt's targeting systems actively prefer dense formations. Every cluster is a more efficient target than a single ship. The historical irony is precise. The same discipline and coordination that made the Mongol military the most effective fighting force of the 13th century is now accelerating their destruction. They're doing everything right. It's just the wrong war, the wrong enemy, and the wrong 1,000 years. But let's be honest, all of that would only happen in a perfect case scenario. Now let's look at the limitations. The no GPS problem the crew solved for Tomahawks becomes a harder problem at range. Inertial navigation drifts over distance. Errors accumulate, and the further the shot, the wider the margin of error. Against 4,400 ships spread across open ocean, this barely registers as a tactical constraint, but it means the Zumwalt is operating closer to its targets, which creates its own risks. Medieval ships can't hurt a destroyer, but a Zumwalt threading through a burning debris field of 4,400 vessels, some of them still crewed, some of them carrying the gunpowder bombs the Mongols used in combat, is not operating in a zero-risk environment. There's also the ammunition problem. 80 VLS cells sounds like a lot until you're looking at 4,400 ships. The Zumwalt doesn't have a Tomahawk for every vessel, not even close. The strategy has to be surgical. Eliminate command and control first, collapse the fleet's ability to organize, then use the gun systems on whatever clusters remain. It works, but it means the outer edges of the formation, the ships furthest from the strike center, the ones that scatter the moment the first fireball appears, have time to run. Some make it to open water. Their crews are alive, rowing hard for Korea, carrying a story nobody at home will believe. Those survivors matter not militarily. The invasion force is finished, shattered beyond any possibility of regrouping. But strategically, Kublai Khan will hear what happened. His advisors will receive reports of a single black ship that moved without wind, struck without warning, and destroyed a fleet of 4,400 vessels before dawn. They'll try to make sense of it in terms they have a sea dragon, a weapon of heaven, a demon from the deep. None of those frameworks will help them build a countermeasure, but none of that stops Kublai Khan from trying. And finally, the Zumwalt is alone. It can destroy most of the fleet's ships and scare the rest away. It cannot hold the coastline, occupy the islands, or guarantee that a rebuilt Mongol navy doesn't attempt this again in 3 years. The ship answers a tactical question decisively. The strategic question, what happens to Japan after the Zumwalt is gone, remains wide open. When the smoke finally clears over Hakata Bay, the largest naval invasion in medieval history has been reduced to floating wreckage and drifting bodies across miles of open water. Japan is saved not by divine wind, not by samurai courage, but by a futuristic ship that wasn't supposed to be there. The Zumwalt was built for a world of GPS constellations, real-time satellite uplinks, and global communications infrastructure. Strip all of that away, and it still wins. Not comfortably, not without adaptation, but decisively. That says something about the depth of the engineering and something about the sheer scale of the gap between 2016 and 1281. After Kublai Khan received the survivors' reports, he began planning a third invasion almost immediately, because that's what Kublai Khan does. The man who absorbed the Song dynasty, who sent armies to Vietnam and Java, and Sakhalin, who ruled from the Caspian Sea to the Pacific Ocean, did not have a mechanism for accepting permanent defeat. He never launched it. Not because of the Zumwalt, not because Japan had defeated him, but because he died in February 1294, still planning, still convinced that the right fleet and the right moment were just ahead of him. The UN dynasty he built outlasted him by 74 years before collapsing under the weight of rebellion and overextension. Japan was never invaded again. Japanese monks would argue about what happened that day for the next 700 years, and no one in any century would ever fully explain.